Hey everybody, welcome back to the Here to See channel. Have an overview for you of the Bible book 2 Timothy, Faithful to the End. Just as we've done with the other Bible books, we'll begin with a review from Dr. Charles Swindoll, Chuck Swindoll's Insight for Living Ministries, that has overviews on each book of the Bible, to include who wrote the book, where are we, why is 2 Timothy so important, what is the big idea, how do I apply this, and an awesome Bible study aid, a Bible study chart provided by Dr. Charles Swindoll. Now, let's get into it. The Bible book overview of 2 Timothy. Who wrote the book? By the time Paul wrote this second letter to Timothy, the young pastor had been ministering to the church at Ephesus for 4 years, and it had been almost that long since he had received his first letter from Paul. Timothy had been a faithful servant to Paul since he had left home with the apostle more than a decade earlier. Since then, Timothy had ministered alongside Paul for the duration of both the second and third missionary journeys in places such as Troas, Philippi, and Corinth. Timothy was not unfamiliar to the Ephesians when he settled in Ephesus to minister, having served there alongside Paul for a period of close to 3 years on Paul's third missionary journey. Paul wrote again to this young leader in the church at Ephesus to provide him encouragement and fortitude in the face of difficulties and trials. And this is a map of the area at the time of 2 Timothy. In Rome, after his final arrest, Paul writes his second letter to Timothy in Ephesus, AD 67. Number 2, Ephesus, Timothy receives his second letter. This was Paul's final writing before he died. Fascinating, isn't it? Where are we? Paul wrote 2 Timothy from a dark and damp Roman prison cell just before his death in AD 67. The Roman Emperor Nero had been slowly descending into madness since his ascent to the throne in AD 54, a process exacerbated by the Great Fire of Rome in AD 64 that burned half the city. With the residents of Rome in an uproar, Christians became a convenient target for Nero, who used believers as scapegoats for his city's own lack of preparedness. Paul was one of those caught up in this persecution and was beheaded by Roman officials soon after writing this letter. Why is 2 Timothy so important? The second letter to Timothy offers a picture of Paul at the end of his ministry, just before his death. Certain personal details in the letter reveal a man settling his accounts and preparing for the inevitable. At the close of the letter, Paul mentioned a significant number of people, some who had wronged him and others who had served faithfully alongside him. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 9 to 21. It is as if Paul were giving Timothy a state of the church address, updating Timothy on the current state of their acquaintances and friends so that the young pastor could carry on after Paul's departure. What is the big idea? Paul understood that the ministry would only become more difficult for Timothy with the apostle's impending death. Indeed, at some point after this letter from Paul, Timothy was imprisoned for his faith. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 23. Paul knew that Timothy's task of keeping the church within the bounds of sound doctrine while encouraging believers to live their lives well for the sake of Christ would be an often thankless and difficult task. Though hardship would come, Paul wanted Timothy to continue in those things that he had learned, drawing on the rich heritage of faith that had been passed down to the young pastor, not just from Paul, but also from his mother and grandmother. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verses 5 and 6, chapter 3, verses 14 and 15. The most striking feature of Paul's encouragement comes when the aging apostle used a phrase that showed up prominently in his letter to Timothy 4 years prior. In that earlier letter, Paul exhorted Timothy to fight the good fight. 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 18, and chapter 6, verse 12. But in this letter, Paul turned that phrase on himself, writing that he had fought the good fight, finished the course, and kept the faith. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 7. What a great encouragement it must have been to the young pastor of the church at Ephesus to know that his mentor boldly modeled his perseverance in the faith even to the point of death. How do I apply this? How do we apply this? 2 Timothy brings us to the brink of death, forcing us to consider its reality on how we might act when faced with it. Paul's response instructs us still today. His mind was not on himself, dwelling on the injustice that had befallen him. Instead, trusting that God had him right where he wanted him, the aging apostle turned his attention to others, specifically to the church and its young protege, Timothy. Where do you hope your thoughts linger as you come to the end of your days? Copyright by Charles R. Swindoll, Incorporated. Now, for the Bible study chart from Insight for Living Ministries, always an awesome tool to use in conjunction with the study. Let's zoom in and look. 2 Timothy is divided into 4 sections along with each chapter. Section number 1, 2 Timothy chapter 1, guard the truth. 2 Timothy chapter 2, the second section, endure suffering. 2 Timothy chapter 3, the third section, remain faithful. And the last section, 2 Timothy chapter 4, preach the word. Always an awesome tool, the Bible study chart from Insight for Living Ministries. This has been our overview of 2 Timothy, awesome book of the Bible. Come along with us as we read through 2 Timothy, a chapter at a time, doing a Hear Journal video on each chapter, just like we've done with other great books of the Bible. We've completed the Old Testament, and we've completed the New Testament all the way through 1 Timothy. So come along with us on 2 Timothy, a chapter at a time. You'll be so glad you did. It's going to be great. Comment below. Share your experiences with us. Have you read 2 Timothy? What's your thoughts about it? And if you don't know Jesus as your Lord and Savior, read the Gospel of John chapter 3 to learn about His forgiveness and talk to God about it. Always talk to God. He loves you. Seek Him now. We'll see you in 2 Timothy chapter 1.